Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. Councilman Brockhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a little bit of a sequence issue here because I seconded Councilman Perry's motion to postpone this for many of the same reasons I agree with you, Councilman, on dialogue and discussion and education and the successes of what comes out of that conflict, right? And I thought you spoke very eloquently and very emphatically that you may have a contrarian or alternative view, but your heart's not in a negative place. I think we have to, no matter what, respect that that is the case. And I just wanted to thank you for at least welcoming that debate, because the fact of the matter is we have citizens coming down. Last night's a perfect example, offering their feedback and ideas, and the process is already done. 9 council members are on the record. The mayor put out a statement that morning saying it was coming down. Cranes are ready, apparently. Police officers' security plans are in place. But welcome, Mr. Citizen, to the dais. Please speak to us in a one-way conversation. But we've already decided this is a done deal. At least the dialogue would have offered an educational opportunity of a back and forth. And so that's why I seconded your motion, and I'm going to push forward on that. But I'm not like as apt on this one to go off script. So unlike Councilman Pelias, I'm going to follow the notes, because I've got a lot of, and contrary to what, this is a personal thing as me as a council member, right? How I do business, the things I find. So if anything, I walk away from this, even if it's only for 2 years, I try to speak from the heart wherever possible. And so to do that, I'm going to have to read this, because this was not a simple or easy decision for me. This took a lot for me to be to where I'm at on this point today. So first off, I want to discuss the importance of following the process. Process protects people and their voice. We did not follow the normal process for removing and relocating a statue or a monument. We did not follow the process laid out by Councilmembers Shaw and Trevino CCR, which thank you for that. I think you outlined that perfectly, what you were expecting. We're not following that process. Instead, we're here today to ignore the process and ignore our own laws, the Unified Development Code, which we're going to bypass and ignore to take down the statue and cannons and stick them into storage. Now, that communication I was speaking of with the public is something that we all ran on to get these chairs, to get here to this moment for each one of us, that communication. There have been opportunities for the public to address City Council, at Citizens to be heard, but have we really heard a true dialogue on this issue? I would argue that we have not. In fact, Citizens to be heard, to Councilman Perry's point, is a one-way conversation, citizen to council. There's not a dialogue there, there's not a debate. It's a one-way conversation. And throughout all the commentary, there was so much, and I kept learning throughout the whole process, because there's a lot of historical inaccuracy and a lot of revisionist history. I mean, there was multiple times proponents of taking down the statue came up here and said it was William Travis, that the statue was of William Travis. I mean, there was a lot of historical inaccuracies. And on the other side, coming up here and saying that slavery was not part of the Confederacy, I could have fallen out of my chair at that moment. I mean, it did make absolutely no sense that someone would come up here and argue that. So throughout all the public commentary, I'm listening and thinking there's historical inaccuracy all through this. Hence why the Historic Design and Review Commission could have been a benefit to this process to clarify the history and the things that stood behind these monuments. So at the very least, that communication, educated dialogue would have been helpful, and that's what I'm arguing for on that point. So transparency is also very important. The item was placed on the agenda on the last possible day for legal posting. The final location, the statue and cannons are still unknown. We're being asked to store these items in an undisclosed location. We have no breakout of what this funding or financing is for. That's not transparency. That's our council voting on minimal information, and that's bad business and an example of poor leadership. So, Mayor Nirenberg, you posted that our community is in the process of having difficult but important conversations about our collective history. We are committed to remembering the past, replacing oppression with justice, and building equity where there was once segregation. And you went on to say, these are not easy conversations, but I'm confident that the residents can come together in a way that honors American free speech traditions. I look forward to continuing to engage the residents. You campaigned for a city that we deserve, and you stated clearly, but nowhere is the health of a community more clearly understood than in the engagement of its citizens in the governance process. And I wholeheartedly agree with you on that point. But where are the actions behind those words? When we don't follow the process, when we don't hold a true dialogue and communicate, transparency suffers. So the process in this case was clear. It was a choice not to follow it. And I would argue that caused a lot more dissension and uncertainty. And then the timing of this vote as well. I think we have to take a step back and realize that the timing issues of what's going on in our state and on our coastal bend, we could have waited. The reality of the situation is there are two options available for this issue to follow. The first is the process that you're asking to modify or waive a clearly stated UDC, and the second is Councilmember Trevino's and Shaw's CCR. We're ignoring both. We watched two nights ago when NEISD changed the name of Robert E. Lee High School. Statues of Christopher Columbus and Abraham Lincoln are being vandalized and desecrated across the country. And I have to ask, because this is what my citizens, the residents that I serve, are asking me, when does it end? That is a fair question. When does it end? Many have said, come up here and spoke on this dais and said that this is just the beginning, that there are multiple more opportunities and statues and images that need to come down. And with that, we should have a process in place to handle and address those. Because it could be anything. It could be Thomas Jefferson High School in District 7, Thomas Jefferson, slave owner. We don't have to go too far in to understand Sally Hemings and hiding that for decades. T.C. Frost. We do multi-million-dollar deals with Frost Bank. Colonel T.C. Frost was a colonel in the Confederate Army. So where is a good Confederate and a bad Confederate? If this dais up here is cutting deals with Frost Bank and moving multi-million-dollar contracts, and there's a plaque on this building, where do we draw the line, right? Where is at the end actually the end? So I would argue we don't own the sins of our ancestors. The sins of our past shouldn't be our cross that we bear today. What we own are the decisions we make right now. That's what's most important to me. What we own are the choices and responsibilities. This is City Council's to build a better future for all of our residents, and that's what I'm attempting to do for the people that I represent. Now that's Greg Brockhouse classic process talk. Now I'm going to have to speak to you from my heart. This was a tough call. Not because of a statue, but because of the many good citizens that came down and tried to engage the process to be heard. A lot of District 6 residents have reached out and shared their feelings with me on this vote. Throughout it all, not a one has said anything to me that would have been construed as racist or attacking or demeaning, to Councilman Perry's point. They're good people who spoke from their hearts, and that should be recognized for what it is, even though we disagree. During much of the citizen comments, it was sad to see, good people being demeaned for their honest beliefs, right or wrong. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that respect is a two-way street, and if we are to move past issues, we have to forgive and strive to see the best in each other. And that was demonstrated this morning. We should attempt to see the best in each other, not always think the worst. So as for monuments, all I can tell you is this. I'm not a black man living in America. I'm not. I don't understand what it means to walk by that statue or Confederate battle flag, and I never will. I simply won't. And frankly, through all the public comments, I truthfully listened most when a black man or woman stood at the microphone and told me how they really felt. And why would you say, would that I pay more attention there? It's because they're living it right now. That's it. Many cared and came forward and stood for their cause, whether you're white, whether a Frenchman was up here arguing, it seemed to me, had a French accent. I don't know if he was from France or what, but he was arguing for it, right? It was great to see people from all walks of life stand up for a friend, but only a few could say with certainty and truth on how they really felt about historical oppression. I took some time in this to talk to my colleague, Cruz Shaw, and I asked him a question, how he honestly felt about the monument and what it stood for. And he spoke to me from his heart, and it spoke to mine. He said that he worried about the children he may have, and he used the word may very specifically to me, in the future, and how they would live in our city, in our community, because of the color of their skin. That monument, the Confederacy, was a reminder of that to Cruz. And he told me that. There was also a lady, I don't know if my colleagues remember, she stood up here, she was a young black woman or adopted two white parents. Her name was Miss Evangelista, of all things, and it stuck with me. It really did. And if you look up what Evangelista means, it means the evangelist or the messenger. And she sent a message to me. So she came down here and speak to us, adoptive daughter, white parents, and was as nervous as I'd ever seen anyone speak at the podium. But as she spoke in a loud and clear heart, she said that the monument hurt her, and no matter how much her loving white parents cared, they would never understand the pain and struggle of her life. And for me, it pretty much ended right there. If we're ever to get past the division of our world, let alone our city, we have to look outside ourselves and dare to care for the life of a fellow citizen without prejudice, without fear of exposure, without the worry of repercussion. That's the conflict right there, and that's the challenge. Putting yourself on a limb, out on that limb to care more about another than you do yourself. And with that challenge in mind, I'm going to vote yes on removing the monument. Because if it's ever going to happen, if we ever get past the division, it has to start with me. And it has to start with you. This is a gesture to say I'm willing to sacrifice my personal belief for the greater good of our community, for my friend Cruz, my colleague, and for Miss Evangelista, who stuck with me throughout the last few weeks. So it's not a blanket bandwagon vote that will apply in perpetuity to any statue or monument that comes my way. I will take each case individually. But at some point, this will have to end. But to get there, it has to start somewhere. And I'm willing to go out on that limb and make it happen with my vote today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Brockhouse. Councilman Saldana.